Oh yeah, don't want to see my on-screen notifications. Here, I'll just stop share. Testing. So just wanted to see if I sound good. If I've reset my audio or anything. Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. We're just at 5 o'clock here, so I think we'll get started. We can see some members of the public that are online here joining us. So good afternoon. Thank you for joining us online for this community information session focused on the proposed official plan and zoning bylaw amendments related to London Plan Heights and Transit Villages. This session is intended to inform and explain the upcoming changes to some City of London planning policies, and there will be time at the end of the formal presentation by City staff for your questions to be answered. Please note that we also welcome feedback through the Get Involved website for this project and others at getinvolved.london.ca/transit villages. To submit your questions for this session, both during and after the formal presentation, please use the Q&A button located at the bottom of your screen. Do not raise your hand. The question portion of this session will be hosted by our communications team here at the city at the end of the formal presentation. Next slide, please. And before we begin the community information session, we would like to state a land acknowledgement. The City of London is situated on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabeg, the Haudenosaunee, the Lenape-Wak, and the Attawandaron peoples. We honor and respect the history, languages, and culture of the diverse Indigenous people who call this territory home. The City of London is currently home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people today. As representatives of the people of the City of London, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live in this territory. So my name is Jeff Shaughnessy. I will be the host this evening. The project planner doing the formal presentation this evening is Stuart Filson. He is supported by the policy manager, Nancy Passato, and hosting the Q&A at the end of the formal presentation from our City of London communications team, Tara Thomas. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Stuart for the formal presentation.
Thank you, Jeff. So on screen is an outline of what I'll be covering today. I'll start by discussing the issues that prompted these policy considerations. Next, I'll briefly describe the city's action plan for tackling housing development. I will then describe the differences between London's official plan, known as the London Plan, and London's zoning bylaw. While today's focus is on the Transit Village amendments, I will give an overview of related policy projects relevant to London's housing supply initiatives. These projects are as follows: the Building Heights Review, the Transit Village amendments, the major shopping area place type, and the new set of zones to support higher intensification along higher order transit. Finally, I will give a targeted timeline of the Transit Village amendments before passing this presentation back to Jeff for follow-up. We all know Canada is facing a housing crisis. London is experiencing unprecedented growth as Ontario's fastest growing city. In 2016, London was projected to have 504,000 people by 2044, which has since been adjusted by another 110,000 people. Building in and up preserves land while minimizing servicing costs. The local context is important. To accelerate housing supply for this city's vibrant future, this project supports the creation of 2 new transit villages and their associated policies. For London's housing supply initiatives, the city is pursuing many efforts. These include proactive as-of-right zoning for high-density developments, encouraging additional dwelling units, promoting infill, encouraging alternative housing construction, making city lands available for affordable housing, improving approval processes to reduce timelines, and partnering to preserve and increase affordable housing. Multiple policy documents dictate land use policies in London. The pyramid on screen is not exhaustive, but provides an overview for London. The provincial government dictates land use policy at a municipal level. London's official plan, known as the London Plan, is the policy framework for planning and development. More locally, additional policies are outlined by place type designations, such as transit villages or shopping areas, among others. The zoning bylaw follows from the London Plan, but is more detailed. Even if a proposal meets the zoning, there are additional processes to ensure suitable developments. The city is working on several policy projects to improve our housing supply and improve affordability. The Heights Review sets out revised building height limits to support development while preserving city objectives. The Transit Village place type amendments support the creation of 2 new mixed-use communities near transit hubs. The new major shopping areas enhances commercial areas to support our economy and new housing. The new protected major transit station zones support high-density development within key corridors. Collectively, these efforts can contribute to a more livable, sustainable, and economically vibrant London. On July 16th, Council reviewed a consultant report recommending revisions to building height policy, which you may view on London's Get Involved website. Here is an excerpt of permitted heights being considered for the respective place types of downtown and transit village, but there are many more policies. Downtown, which is the most intense place type, currently permits 35 stories as the upper maximum height, and 45 stories are being considered. Transit villages currently permit 22 stories as the upper maximum height, compared with 30 stories, which is being considered. Keep in mind that zones within these place types may have shorter maximum heights. The follow-up heights report is scheduled for September 10th and will provide policy recommendations. For major streets within the neighborhood place type, the current maximum height is 6 stories and 8 stories is being considered. Again, there are many other policies for consideration. And for reference on screen is an intersection that shows this higher order neighborhood. On the left of the screen is the proposed transit village at Oxford Richmond. On the right is the new transit village at 100 Kellogg. You may have seen an earlier version of these boundaries. Please note that staff have since considered reduced boundaries as shown here. So transit villages are second only to the downtown place type in uses and development intensity. Transit villages are intended to support the transit system. The transit villages require transit-oriented development forms and support the provision of a range of housing types, forms, tenure, and affordability near existing or planned higher order transit stations. For the London plan, the proposed transit village official plan amendments include amending the transit village place type policies to permit additional transit villages, adding new transit place types, transit village place types situated at and surrounding the Oxford Richmond intersection and 100 Kellogg Lane. The purpose of these amendments is to streamline the processes or policies for mixed use higher intensity developments centered within these transit villages. The transitional policies and processes would still be upheld. The Oxford-Richmond intersection sits at the cross-section of several neighborhoods that serve as a gateway to town. As a growing area, Oxford-Richmond has many residences and businesses. This intersection already supports several notable bus stops that connect to many different transit lines throughout London. Since 2017, various renovations have happened at 100 Kellogg to repurpose these lands as a mixed-use hub with access to higher order transits. As shown in pink on the map, the shopping area place type is scattered throughout the city. Staff are proposing the creation of a new major shopping area overlay as indicated by the green circles that permits additional intensity in key locations with further residential opportunities. While the within the London plan, shopping areas are characterized by commercial and office land uses, but there is a lot of variety. Some shopping areas contain a single retail store, while others are a mix of uses. A couple of shopping areas are exclusively residential. Given this variety, some shopping areas are more appropriate for residential intensification than others. The goal of this policy effort is to increase the residential land use component without removing the commercial land use focus. There are additional proposed official plan and zoning amendments being considered to create a new set of zones supporting transit that allows for mixed use developments, including commercial and office on ground floor with residential above. These zones also include varying maximum heights. The intention of this effort is to streamline approval processes for higher intensity proposals in accordance with added standards. As with all of these amendments, more information can be found on the respective Get Involved web pages as seen here. Here's the timeline for the Transit Village amendments. So far, we have circulated notices and done various outreach efforts to spread the word about staff efforts, including this community information meeting. Of note, we have circulated a new public notice with more recent information about London Heights, transit villages, and major shopping areas. On September 10th, the staff report will be reviewed at the Planning and Environment Committee meeting, which is a public participation meeting. The report will be public. Finally, council will receive the report on September 24th. For additional information on transit villages or any of the other projects, I encourage everyone to look at our Get Involved web pages. There you may access the latest information about these efforts. Your support and feedback are crucial as we move forward. Now I'll pass this back over to Jeff for the next segment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stuart, for that presentation in regards to the subject matter. At this time, we can see some Q&A. The Q&A box is pretty active on our side here, so I would like to turn it over to Tara Thomas, our communications representative here at the City of London, to host the Q&A session. Tara.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for joining. I've been watching some Q&As coming in here. I thought I'm kind of going through them. Everyone can remain anonymous, but I thought a good question that to start things off is someone has asked, will you explain what a transit village consists of? Does it mean removing present buildings and building high rises?
Thank you, Tara. Generally, the transit village place type would support higher intensity high-rise development. So there is the potential that buildings, yes, could be removed or also repurposed and consolidated perhaps. But generally, yes, there could be additional high-rise development within these areas.
Thanks, Nancy. Some of these ones came in earlier, but I haven't seen updates. So I'm going to start. And it said, can you speak to the anticipated design of the transit station at Oxford and Richmond, which I presume would be built before any independent development occurs, and speak to the anticipated timelines? I think Stuart covered some of this, but maybe if a summary of this would be helpful.
Yes, so at this time, there is no transit station to be developed at the Richmond-Oxford intersection. Transit Village is like I said, a place type that is considered within the hierarchy of the London Plan generally. So what it's meant to be is major hubs where increased intensification can happen, and then sort of spokes coming out of that along rapid transit corridors. So if you imagine that kind of a scenario, that's basically what our official plan has set out in terms of where we want to see higher order growth going towards or flowing towards the downtown, which is supposed to be our highest intensity uses. As you may or may not know, the transit is not proposed to be going north of the downtown at this time. That particular leg has been not supported by council at this time. However, the London Plan is a long-term document. So what it means is that we're planning for 20, 30, 40 years from now and how we want to see London grow. So one of the things is ensuring that we intensify in certain areas rather than across the city. If you think about it like almost like spreading peanut butter, I guess you could say. It's a bad analogy, but basically we want to ensure that it's targeted in particular areas rather than allowed everywhere. And that way, when we do develop transit to support residents, we know that in these areas, there will be that higher concentration of people, essentially. So at the end of the day, the transit will hopefully come or follow based on where the people will be living. The higher intensity amounts of people will be living.
Thanks, Nancy. I hope that provides some clarity for folks. Another question here I'm seeing is, I'm wondering if the property owners along Sydenham were consulted as to whether they want to be included in the transit village or not. If not, how did you decide on the staggered line?
So originally, I believe the transit village was shown as potentially being applied up to the properties on Sydenham as well. But lately, because of the feedback we have been receiving from a lot of residents, we have actually removed some of those properties. We're really just looking now at adding Transit Village along the frontage of Oxford Street and Richmond, with enough property depth essentially to allow for some form of development, but not encroaching all the way up to Sydenham. So depending on your feelings on that, you can certainly provide your comments to us about where that line should be. But essentially the four corners have been included, or rather are being recommended to be included in the Transit Village to allow for those four corners to redevelop with, like I said, additional frontages along the major streets.
Thank you, Nancy. We have lots of questions coming in here. Thank everyone for being patient with me. It's tricky on one screen to keep these going, but here is another one. It said, could you please show the map again for Richmond and Oxford? It seems to have changed since you circulated the original, it looks like, notice.
Absolutely. So Stuart will move to the original. Yes, it has. As Stuart indicated through his presentation, we have moved that red line to the north, slightly down. Originally, I believe it included more properties along Sydenham, and those have been removed in favor of the line that you see here, which I hopefully explained was to allow for redevelopment along the major arterials or roads rather than encroaching into the neighborhood.
Thank you, Nancy. Another question here is, why was the core or West 5 not chosen? West 5 has no support and the downtown core has not been supported with a transit hub.
I think, is West 5 the Riverbend area that someone is referring to? Hopefully that's correct. The Riverbend area at this point is still a developing type of neighborhood. I think it hasn't even completed a lot of the development or proposed subdivisions, for instance, that are supposed to be developed in this area. So it's really an emerging area. I mean, it's who's to say that in the future it may not also become or be considered as a transit village, and it may at some point be a candidate for such. But at this point, I think it's too new of a neighborhood, and it hasn't fully developed to really be considered for those sorts of infill and intensification components.
Thanks, Nancy. Sorry, there's lots coming in, and I think some of them have been answered. I'm trying to do my best. Is there any consideration to bring the LRT back through the Oxford-Richmond intersection?
I know from a planning perspective, I think there would we would like to see, obviously, the consideration of some form of transit, a higher order transit along the potentially the Richmond corridor. But as you know, it's also something that will need to be discussed and approved by council. So at this point, I'm not aware of any motions in front of council for that to happen.
It says, how many transit villages have been approved?
I think right now we have, I believe, at least 4, and those include Masonville, the Masonville Mall area, as well as the White Oaks Mall area. So 2 major hubs kind of in that north-south direction. And then we also, I believe, have one in the East End, in and around the what's generally known as the London Psychiatric Hospital lands, as well as one in the West End. And I believe that is the, oh, I'd have to look at the map. I apologize. I can't recall exactly, but it's definitely in the West End. I believe it's the Wonderland Road area. Oh, it is. I'm sorry. It is the Wonderland and Oxford Road area. That's right.
Oh, that's helpful, Nancy. And I also wanted to note too, as I'm going through these, and some of them I feel like, you know, timelines and stuff we've addressed. our website is always available and folks can go to get involved. And if they're not getting the answer that, meets their needs, please reach out to the team again. You can always contact one of the team members, submit a question, contact them directly. So, because we're doing our best, this was really meant as a information session. Someone did ask around why some of the public consultation is happening over this summer when they thought it was a high vacation time. Maybe Nancy or Stuart, if we could go back to, I know that there's upcoming meetings and it pushes into the fall, if we could confirm that for folks.
Yes, so unfortunately, we're a bit under a time crunch as the case may be. So what's happened is these are all projects as a result of the Housing Accelerator Fund, which is probably a term that Stuart mentioned in his presentation, and it has been mentioned in the media quite a bit as of late for the city. The city is set to receive monies to help to accelerate housing, specifically in certain key areas or key ways. But in order to receive those funds, we have a very tight timeline with which to get approval and essentially have council endorse these various projects in order to basically get rolling on those things. So because of that, we are basically we haven't had a lot of time to do the circulation and the outreach to residents, but September 10th will be the PEC date that we need to hit basically to ensure that we stay on target for the HAF initiatives and projects.
Thank you, Nancy. Says, is the transit village at Oxford and Richmond intended to service the businesses on Richmond? Is that the primary reason the site was chosen?
Sorry, can you repeat that one? I missed the beginning part of that, sorry.
Is the transit village at Oxford and Richmond intended to service the businesses on Richmond? Is that the primary reason the site was chosen?
No, I think one of the primary reasons that this site was chosen was its proximity to the downtown and its sort of almost extension of sort of that downtown consideration, as well as its current ability to be serviced by transit. There's already a strong presence along Oxford Street and Richmond for transit. And because of its proximity to the downtown, it was a natural sort of selection to include as well those additional intensities and heights, I think. So.
Oh, that's helpful. That actually leads into another question. It says, can staff speak to the allowances or permissions for office space being contemplated in the transit village zones?
I think overall the transit village is limited to a certain amount of office space. Off the top of my head, I don't have the policy available, but it's somewhere in the range of 5,000 square meters from what I recall. And those wouldn't change. Whatever is currently permitted through the transit village, we're not altering those permissions. So they will continue on and be applied to these new transit villages as well.
Thanks, Nancy. This might have been, sorry, I've been reading and maybe not exactly, but one of the questions says policies allow for a maximum of 20 meters squared. Was that one? Was that an amount that you noted, maybe, Nancy?
No.
Okay.
Maybe it's 20,000 throughout the whole transit village. I know that generally, like I said, the official plan has that hierarchy of where the most intensive uses will be, and the biggest office uses are generally directed towards the downtown, but individual or other uses are permitted under the transit village. I had thought it was 5,000 square meters, but I could be incorrect. I unfortunately have not memorized the London plan, so I don't know every square meter when it comes to certain uses, but I believe it's about 5,000.
Why was Richmond and Oxford chosen over Adelaide and Oxford if your intent is to supplement downtown, given the underpass that has just been completed?
As mentioned previously, it's very much seen as sort of almost an extension or adjacent to the downtown, which is very helpful. Adelaide and Oxford isn't as much of that. I know the underpass has just been built, which is a wonderful addition. But through our official plan and what's been planned previously, Richmond had originally been analyzed, I think, as the major transit thoroughfare for the future. And I think it continues to be considered, I think, and from our planning perspective. So Richmond and Oxford makes a more logical sense in terms of the uses. In terms of the transit village locating there.
Thanks, Nancy. There's a large group of folks that I think they're having some difficulties. So I'm hoping maybe they can get back to me if they had some questions that were not being answered for them. Are there transit villages mostly geared to housing students and or social housing? Do these villages consider where people work and how they get there?
Well, part of the consideration for transit villages is it's hoped that this would be an area where we could concentrate jobs and residential uses. It may even allow for opportunities for people to be able to work and live within a particular area, which would be incredibly helpful, obviously, from many different perspectives. But in terms of the question about social housing, I'm not sure what that would mean. We do not, social housing can occur pretty much almost anywhere and can be built almost anywhere, depending on lots of different factors. So anyways, if there's more clarification needed, someone can perhaps ask a follow-up question.
Sorry, Tara, I think you're muted currently.
Thank you, Jeff.
No problem.
Thanks, Nancy. I will watch for a follow-up on that one and going up to another one, hoping for a little more explanation around why it was chosen to encroach on historic North London neighborhoods by going east-west along Oxford Street as opposed to north-south along Richmond Street.
We currently have a policy within our official plan that recognizes that Richmond corridor as sort of a preservation corridor. So it has special policies that, recognize that that's an area that is looked to be preserved, or the heritage component to be preserved. So therefore, then we looked at lengthening, or rather providing that transit village along the Oxford corridor instead, which I'm sure also has some heritage considerations, which will need to be addressed through any future application. But it just has the ability to potentially support some additional high-rise or higher intensity development.
Thanks, Nancy. I think this is in the similar line. Some of the red outline zones encroach directly on residences. They also include rights of way like laneways. How will development take these into account?
That will be something that will have to occur when individual developments come forward, whether they can obtain the rights for the laneways, whether that can be incorporated into any future development. That will all need to be considered through any eventual application. It's important to note that these changes at this time are just through policy. So there are no development applications that we that are currently have been applied for in this immediate area that I'm aware of, and that this is all policy driven at this point. So a lot of those questions will have to be answered basically at the next stage once someone has decided to develop.
Thank you, Nancy.
Just a really quick follow-up. I was able to pull up the official plan and just confirm that the transit villages overall have the ability to develop 20,000 square meters worth of offices across the whole node, so across the whole transit village place type. but 5,000 square meters individually on each individual property for a total of
Thanks.
20,000.
Thanks, Nancy. Going back in that London plan, it's just at your fingertips.
Yeah.
Here's a question. Will this transit village allow for fast tracking of development applications? Can you provide clarity?
In terms of, it would allow for higher intensity uses, obviously, if it is supported by council. But really, what would allow for, I guess you could say, the potential for fast tracking development would be through the protected major transit station zoning, which is also a get involved page. That project will be adding actual zoning to these sites, as well as any transit village, rapid transit corridor, and downtown place type. So that will allow for zoning up to a maximum height. And that would certainly negate the need for a zoning bylaw amendment, for instance, for properties to be able to redevelop, and instead allow them to potentially instead go straight to site plan or submit a site plan and potentially redevelop that way.
Thank you, Nancy. Here's another one. What is so special about the designation transit village? If it does not infer a special transit connection, does it indicate to London Transit that we want more transit here? Or does it simply mean that this site has higher density because there is, or we hope there will be in the future, more transit buses and frequency?
I think it's a bit of all of those things. As I mentioned, planning obviously has developed the London plan with the transit villages known as these sort of hubs that we're hoping intensity will occur, and with rapid transit corridors to sort of link those up, all connected to the downtown. To us, from a transportation planning perspective, that makes a lot of sense from a transit perspective. And I think over the years, there'll be further discussions with LTC, our rapid transit people as well, eventually maybe council, and there may be sort of more higher order transit that would follow.
Thanks, Nancy. Can you explain as of right?
So as of right, zone, for instance, it's usually used as that term is used for something like as of right zoning. What that means is the zoning that potentially applies to a property permits a use as of right. So, or permits a height as of right. So, a particular zone was applied to a property and it allows for a height of 15 meters. That means as of right, you are able to then apply for a site plan or some sort of plan to allow for development up to that maximum.
Thank you. Stuart, are you able to put the map up again, please? We have a request for that. Might spark another question. How do the train tracks figure into the Oxford Richmond Transit Village?
Well, the train tracks exist. So as part of any development that comes forward, there will be obviously circulation and discussion with the, I believe that's CP Rail. That might be CP Rail. So there'll need to be discussions with that. There are certain requirements or setbacks that CP Rail or CN Rail for that matter will have with respect to new development. So all of those will need to be addressed through any site plan.
I'm on mute again. Someone should get a quarter jar out. Sorry about that. Has the city considered the effects of overshadowing of these heritage homes north of Oxford by the proposed massive buildings?
So as part of any application, again, that comes forward, such as a high-rise building, at site plan, we have certain requirements that will be required for any submission. One of those things would be something like a heritage impact assessment based on adjacent heritage properties. And that heritage impact assessment would assess the what kind of mitigation, what sorts of considerations there would need to be for any new development on the adjacent heritage homes, for instance. So that's a component that would be required and would be addressed at site plan.
Thank you. What is the difference between a transit village and a transit hub?
Transit hub is just a sort of a generalized term that we might use. But a transit village is defined in our London plan, and it is, as mentioned, sort of considered to be a higher order transit node hub that basically allows for higher intensity uses serviced by transit or future transit.
Thank you. Getting some specific ones. I'm not so sure if this is out of the scope, but I will ask them because they're here. Why were the lands north of Dundas not included?
Depending on where you're looking at on Dundas, Dundas is already, first of all, most of it is, well, some of it is within the downtown place type, which, as we mentioned, is the highest order in terms of intensity and uses. So we wouldn't be looking to create a transit hub, transit village there because it's already within the downtown. And then I think most of Dundas is actually what's called a rapid transit corridor, which does allow for additional heights and densities as well, just not in a form like a transit village. A transit village has more of almost a node type of a form, whereas rapid transit extends along a road such as Dundas Street.
This is another pretty specific one. When will bus laybys be incorporated into the transit plan on Oxford, especially at Warncliffe? I'm not sure if that's...
I don't think I'm going to be able to answer that question today, unfortunately, but if you do have questions about the current transit or any upgrades, etc., if you'd like to reach out to our team, we might be able to get you in touch with the right people so we can get those answers for you.
And if you actually, as we mentioned before on our Get Involved site, it has who's listening and it has all the team members on all the various projects, specifically this one, and you can reach out and ask questions, get contact information if you have some more specific things. I will attempt to keep working my way through these Q&As. Nancy, feels like you need a sip of water or something. You've been doing great here.
You're probably right.
Let's take a little break. I'm going to go to the bottom. Will shadowing impact as of right? In other words, will any negative impact from height impact the as of right? Can you get some clarity around?
But I'm not really entirely sure of the question, but I can answer this in terms of shadowing impacts. Again, that's something that would be required as part of any site plan application. Typically would require some sort of a shadowing study to determine if there will be impacts and how to mitigate those types of impacts as well.
And then going back to you were talking about the as of right, just means that you wouldn't have to try to get amendments for things. That would just be like the baseline approval. So
that's absolutely right. Yes.
Okay. So maybe if there was some more clarity around that one, we might be able to attempt to get a more concise answer. Okay, we're working our way through here. Would it be logical to include the lands north of Dundas between Burbrook Place and Nightingale Avenue within the new transit village?
I don't think we had considered that particular extension. I think is it too far from the Kellogg's? I believe it's too far from that Kellogg's transit village potentially. But nothing prevents us from considering potential additional transit villages in the future, but we do have to consider them as well from that higher intensity use and also that notion. I know it's a terrible analogy and I'm using it again, but the spreading of the peanut butter, you really want to ensure that they're concentrated and that they're not, it doesn't become watered down, that there's so many transit villages and so many heights permitted across all over the place that it actually starts to spread out where those uses are, and it doesn't get that effect of having additional, intensity within a particular area that allows for transit to service it. So,
Thank you, Nancy. We have a question here. To what extent has LTC been consulted about the potential transit village locations?
they were circulated the policy change, but as of yet, we haven't received any comments. It's something that we'll be reaching out to. We have been working with the mobility master plan people as well, who are also in contact with LTC as well. But that's a future plan. It's a plan to discuss this with them as well.
Thank you, Nancy. Okay. Does the height designation still mean that properties must conform to some kind of setbacks or step backs? Is this the zoning piece that would overlay the top of the transit village place type?
Yes, there will be additional setbacks and stepbacks. There are some proposed, if you go to the Get Involved page for the protected major transit stations, the draft zone for those protected major transit stations is available on there as well. And you can see in there are regulations associated with that zone, much like any of the zones that we currently have in our zoning bylaw. And those include regulations such as stepbacks and setbacks for new development.
Here's another one for clarity. Someone may have missed it. Let folks know why there were changes to the original map at Oxford and Richmond. Was it a result of a property owner input or simply a reassessment of that part of the city?
No, it was primarily from the feedback we had been receiving from the neighborhood with respect to that boundary.
Thank you, Nancy. Are there any plans to change the place type to any of the existing transit village areas identified in the London plan?
Not at this time. We're not planning on changing any of the other transit village place types. And we're not considering, for instance, expanding them or adding on to them.
Thank you. These questions just keep coming in here. Lots of interested folks. It's exciting to see. Many of the transit villages seem to be destinations, malls, or intersections of two major roads. The Kellogg Transit Village does not seem to be either of those. Is there a reason this area was selected, perhaps an area that currently is not overdeveloped and had potential for greater density?
So the Kellogg's area, it has the 100 Kellogg's, which has become actually quite the entertainment hub district, and in fact is sort of has a lot of plans as well to even expand on the current uses that are there. So really, it was considered because of that entertainment hub component, as well as its location on the rapid transit corridor adjacent to Old East Village. That was one of the reasons that it was selected.
Thanks, Nancy. What is the interrelationship between transit village designation and the near campus neighborhood regulations? And then there's a more specifically, do you want to do it in two parts? Or here
No, that's fine. Continue.
Specifically, if there is a conflict between the special protections in the NCN area and the transit village place type, which prevails? That's pretty specific.
Well, the near campus neighborhood policies generally discourage, what it actually does is tends to encourage higher intensity development along major corridors, so it protects more of the interior neighborhoods. Whereas Transit Village, and I think Transit Village does something similar, would potentially protect more of the interior neighborhood and allow those to even revert back to residential homes, et cetera, and create more units along those major corridors. and therefore students could potentially live in those higher intensity uses along the major corridors, availing of the transit. So neither is read in isolation, I guess you could say. They both are read together, but the Oxford and Richmond area obviously has considerations as a student area, but the near campus, like I said, the policies generally try to direct all of the student uses or student residence type uses towards those higher intensity corridors rather than on the interior.
Thank you, Nancy. It says, does the Kellogg Transit Village not go north of Dundas? Or why does the Kellogg's Transit Village not go north of Dundas?
There's currently a secondary plan for those lands north of Dundas. It's called the McCormick Secondary Plan. That has its own planning considerations, basically. And because that's already been completed, we didn't felt it would be a good idea to essentially take away from the planning structure that was already in place north of Dundas. So it has its own planning heights and considerations and mixes, et cetera. And this land south, though, at this time did not.
Thank you. Another one. What priority do you give to the heritage property and homes and buildings abutting the heritage area and the negative impact on property values?
I'm not sure how to answer that question, but we, as I mentioned previously, any site plans that are submitted as part of any application would be required to consider heritage impact assessment, which will obviously look at mitigation with respect to new development on existing heritage buildings. So that will be required through any new development application. And in terms of property values, it's very difficult to answer property value questions because it is something that it gets brought up quite a bit, but there's no actual how do I say this, any sort of information that actually points to any change to property values, for instance. So I don't think I'll be able to answer that.
For trying, Nancy. Here's maybe an easier one. Why would you not create a wider buffer between the heritage zones and what we're proposing for Oxford and Richmond?
Just to clarify, there is no heritage zones that I'm aware of in the area. But if you mean heritage properties, again, when a site plan comes in with respect to a heritage impact assessment, that is something that it would review is how can we mitigate that type of high-rise development on any adjacent heritage properties, and that will be a consideration. But in terms of a greater buffer, I guess that's a comment that can be made. If you'd like to submit that separately on our website or to Stuart after the meeting, if that's something you'd like us to consider is how to a greater setback or something along those lines with respect to heritage, then perhaps that's something you can provide in terms of comments.
Just really quickly, everybody, we're at 5:50 now, so we have 10 minutes remaining in our scheduled time. Just want to be mindful of everyone's time, both on the call and answering questions. So just wanted to flag that for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Here's one. Will casinos be permitted within transit villages?
I am not sure if a casino is considered a permitted use. Generally, transit villages do permit a broad range of residential, retail, commercial, entertainment uses, which could potentially be casino. But I believe I'm not entirely sure through the protected major transit station zones if something like casino is actually permitted. I don't think it is. I think it's only permitted in very limited circumstances. Hopefully I'm not wrong on that, but if you'd like, you can check out the protected major transit station Get Involved page and see for yourself if something like a casino is permitted.
Thanks, Nancy. Someone was asking if this recording will be made available, and yes, it will. Once it's available on the cloud, we'll be posting it on the project website so folks can go back and reference it, and it'll be available for others to share this information. We have another one that says Bishop Helmuth is directly implicated here, not implicated or impacted, but why has there not been a heritage impact study before undertaking this exercise?
So generally, heritage impact assessments are done, usually they're done at the time of the development application, such as, when a site plan, for instance, comes in, because we would need to know the form of development and how that can mitigate based on adjacent heritage considerations. So that's generally the time that we would require those heritage impact assessments.
Says, is it too late to object at the site plan level when the areas are predefined at this level?
Generally, yes, site plan is not a public process per se. It does not have a public meeting component, for instance, and does not have, it's not circulated to the public, for instance. So if there is issues, then it would be something that you would need to provide comment, for instance, now at the official plan and zoning stage. That would be the time to comment.
You. Another one. Will there be a coordinated strategy to ensure sufficient infrastructure capacity is available to serve future development in each of the transit villages?
I'm going to make the assumption that that is referring to services such as water, sewer, stormwater, et cetera. And if that's the case, then yes, that's something that is required as part of any site plan application, ensuring that there is adequate services to service any development.
Hopefully that answers their question. Here's one maybe we could get a little clarity around. Are transit villages being planned for the new BRT?
Again, and as I mentioned previously throughout the this presentation, in our official plan, we are planning for a higher order transit, and that's why we have designated various transit villages, rapid transit corridors, et cetera. So it is the hope that in the future there will be some form of higher order transit to service those higher intensity uses as well and connect them all.
Here's one a little specific again. Aside from the amendment to figure 4.19 of the zoning bylaw, are there zone changes associated with these transit village place type amendments?
So not through this application, no. The transit village place type is only amending the official plan with the one very small amendment to the zoning bylaw. The protected major transit station areas zoning review is where the zoning would be applied with respect to these new transit villages as well.
Here we can build on this one. It says, what impact does the present proposal have on future zoning and site plan requirements?
So this official plan amendment would set essentially the heights and permitted uses, et cetera, and as mentioned previously, expand on the areas that are considered transit village. The actual zoning itself would be completed through the protected major transit station zoning review, which, as I mentioned, has a get involved page as well. And then after, if those are adopted by council and approved, essentially, and site plans could be submitted at any time.
Nancy, here's one we're going back. There's been some interest in the Bishop Helmuth. So this one says, why are you putting the transit village zone on the north side of Oxford between Richmond and Wellington, but leave it on the southwest of Richmond and Oxford intersection? In other words, why does it have to jut into the Bishop Helmuth neighborhood?
As we kind of discussed previously, It was to allow for some frontage along the major higher order streets, so there would be development flanking both sides, such as the Richmond and the Oxford corridors. So those properties were selected based on the ability to potentially redevelop, so they have enough depth or ability to redevelop when either consolidated or small consolidations.
See if some have already been answered, and I know we're coming out of time, and I might go back to just some folks and take it offline. The recording, can you answer the question? How will as of right impact lower heights? For example, if shadowing negatively impacts low-rise houses, will as of right be overridden?
No, through site plan, any sort of shadowing impact would look at how to mitigate something like that, whether that be, orientation or something like that. It would look at how to ensure that the development that's being considered has the ability to mitigate or any sort of shadowing impacts, or how to mitigate those shadowing impacts.
Here's another, just a follow-up, I think, kind of to that one and the last one. So if zoning changes to certain intensity as a matter of right, so as of right, how will heritage impacts be assessed and protected?
So again, the heritage impact assessment is to assess and mitigate. It's not, I think there might be a misunderstanding that heritage impact assessment would be done and no development would ever be allowed. That's not what a heritage impact assessment does. It assesses the ability of the new development and how it can mitigate based on the existing heritage attributes that are found in the immediate area, for instance. So whether that needs to be, I'm not even sure what kind of mitigation there could be, but basically how to mitigate those impacts.
Can the property owners at Piccadilly and Wellington ask to opt in to the transit village designation? It seems odd to exclude them as they are only 2 properties in that block and not included.
Well, that's something that can be provided in terms of comments to our project team. If you are interested in being included in the transit village place type, then please submit your comments to us.
Got some really great questions tonight, and Nancy, you've been fantastic. I've been trying to address all of them. There are still some I may know some folks were having some technical difficulties around trying to participate, and I would like to follow up with them directly. Maybe just one more question.
Yeah, if we pick one more question, it'd be a good question to end on, and I can continue to our wrapping up here as we approach 6 o'clock.
Will hotels be included as permitted uses within the proposed zoning for transit villages?
Yeah, as I mentioned previously, the permitted uses under the broad transit village is very broad. It just generally says residential, commercial, etc. I'm not sure though, but you can check the protected major transit station, that zone that we were talking about under the Get Involved page, the new TSA zone it's called, and see if hotels are permitted. But generally, I think they are. I'll be honest, I'm not sure if hotels are permitted, because we do want to see hotels concentrated in the downtown. So I'm not sure if we wanted to see them permitted as well in transit villages or not.
Thanks, Nancy. Here's, I have a better one here to close out on. This says, other than our website, has public invitation been made in the media or internet or social media to encourage public participation that for folks that this will redefine their neighborhood? So maybe that's a nice note to round out on, and we can share some of our, like we've said, we have our website, and maybe Nancy could share a little bit about how the public notices are sent out and how we encourage folks to reach out, and how the staff is always more than happy to answer questions and connect with folks, and then the upcoming opportunities.
Yes, so we did send out notice to, I believe it was somewhere in the vicinity of 1,700 properties with respect to this, the addition of the Oxford, Richmond, and 100 Kellogg's transit villages. So that was a paper notice that most of the people would have received, as well as within 120 meters of that overall boundary. So if you did receive a previous notice, you will receive the new notice, which is coming out. Stuart said this week, but it's actually coming out next week. Will be put into the mail. So you'll receive that new revised notice that talks about how the 3 combined applications will be brought forward to this September 10th Planning and Environment Committee. And it allows you also an opportunity to continue to comment up to the deadline of the meeting. As well, we have our Get Involved pages, which have a lot of really good information with respect to what is a transit village, what is a protected major transit station area. All of those questions that you may have might be answered from our FAQs page on those Get Involved pages. So we really encourage you to go to those pages and check them out and sign up for any updates. So you're aware of any updates that are happening to the webpage overall. And of course, as well, there will be a meeting on September 10th, and we encourage you to attend, whether online or in person, to also give your comments, as well as provide your comments ahead of time to Stuart and myself with respect to these applications.
Perfect. Thanks, Nancy. I just wanted to say in closing here, I really want to thank Nancy and Stuart for this presentation. I would really like to thank Tara for her great Q&A moderation. We had quite a few questions come in, so it was difficult to get to everything. We are up against a bit of a time crunch here. But what we are planning on doing is anything that wasn't answered here, we will attempt to answer it in the FAQ on the Get Involved page. Also, there was some statements made within the Q&A form about communication and how they can get involved other than just the online format, which the city has found hosting online community information sessions is very beneficial in the terms of providing some anonymity for some people. And the moderated Q&A function has worked well with many previous public meetings. One of those things that has come out of the pandemic that we might not have envisioned back prior to 2020. So if anybody would like to phone in with any questions, you can contact Planning and Development at 519-930-3500. Or there's an email address that has been set up as part of the Housing Accelerator Fund and all of the projects that are underneath, and that is planninghaf@london.ca. Any questions you submit in regards to this project will be forwarded to the appropriate staff members. Other than that, I think that that about wraps it up for us tonight. Tara, is there anything further from your end from a communications perspective?
No, I see a little shout out that folks could also reach out and contact their city councilors in their area if they have some questions or want to connect. So I wanted to make note of that. That came into the Q&As.
Absolutely. Yep. Councilors are always a great touch point for residents here in the city as well.
It would be Councillor Tressa or Ferreira.
Okay, I think that's it from the project team. So again, I really want to thank our attendees for taking the time out of their late afternoons, early evenings for joining us this evening. Again, my thanks to Nancy and Stuart and to Tara for the moderation. And my name's Jeff Shaughnessy. Thank you very much for joining us. A reminder that the recording will be available on the Get Involved page, and you can submit any further questions through the Get Involved page as well, or the phone number for P&D, Planning and Development, at 519-930-3500, or the email address planninghaf@london.ca. And I think that's it for us for tonight. Thank you very much for attending. Take care.